Ever since the release of Vampire Survivors a couple of years ago, every single time Steam has a Next Fest or a collection of game demos that you can play from new upcoming games that are going to be released at some point in the near future, there have been about 1 billion Vampire Survivors likes. That game was extremely successful, I get it. I've liked a lot of Vampire Survivors clones out there, and Vampire Survivors, is worth noting, is kind of a clone in and of itself. If you saw my video from a while ago about the rise of the Balatro-like, or the Parlor Rogue, however you want to call it, it's worth mentioning that the Vampire Survivors like has kind of been rising at the exact same speed. For every game like Roulette or Scrabble or Pool getting Balatro style upgrades and roguelike mechanics added to them, you have another 5 games showing up that are Vampire Survivors but X. Every time there's a Next Fest, I have a lot of developers emailing me about their demos, and most of them, if I'm being honest, are Vampire Survivors likes. And I play all of them, and I do like most of them. And if I'm being honest, I like a lot of them more than I liked Vampire Survivors. I think that game is pretty good, but I also think it's a little mindless. I think it's a game that could use just a little bit of that je ne sais quoi, if you know what I mean. So a game like Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, for example, takes everything that works about Vampire Survivors, but then adds a mining element to it, which allows you to force choke points that you need to funnel bugs through, and that fires more neurons in my head and makes me more interested. So in a sea of Vampire Survivors likes, imagine my surprise when one of the most exciting games I've seen at a Steam Next Fest is actually just by the developers of Vampire Survivors, and it's really not like those games at all. Vampire Crawlers is a new first-person dungeon crawling game from Ponkel, the team that made Vampire Survivors, and very, very quickly became one of my most anticipated games of the year. The game spawns you on the floor of a dungeon. You pick one of the crawlers, who are just the survivors from Vampire Survivors, and you make your way around this dungeon, and you can see a little map in the corner that shows you where enemies are, and you go fight these enemies by collecting and using cards, which are just the weapons from Vampire Survivors. So if you've played Vampire Survivors, you will understand when I say something like the magic wand will hit one enemy, whereas something like, the Bible will hit a bunch of enemies at once. A lot of these things operate exactly how they did in Vampire Survivors, which makes the combat really, really snappy if you have any idea of how Vampire Survivors worked in the back of your head. Where this game really starts to work for me is both the speed at which you make your way through combat and through each floor of the dungeon, and also just some of the secrets and little synergies that you start to find along the way. For example, if your hand has a bunch of cards and it doesn't really matter which order you play those cards in, they just have a button there that's play all cards. And it'll just play all the cards at once, and you'll do as much damage as you would do if you played all those cards individually, and you just kind of make your way through that round very fast. But if you want to take your time with it, you can sit there and say, I'm going to use the Antonio card, and then the spinach, and then the whip, in that order. On top of that, there are a lot of little touches also kind of pulled from Vampire Survivors. So, for example, if you are making your way through the library level and you see a candelabra holding, a bunch of candles, you can smash into it and maybe it'll drop something. I assume there are way more secrets that I'm even aware of in this thing. This feels like a game that you could just kind of dig at forever, already just in the demo. Also, like in Vampire Survivors, as you continue to defeat enemies, you get experience points, and once you max out that experience bar, you level up and you get to add a new card to your deck. A nice touch is that you get to use that card for free immediately if you're in the middle of combat. So, even if you don't have the mana for it and you get a card that costs 2 mana, you can just use that immediately. And also, like in Vampire Survivors, when you're done with a run, you get permanent upgrades. You can go into this one house in a village that you get to maintain, and you just get to, pick I'm going to have a permanent experience buff for every run I do from now on, which is a nice touch. I gotta say, Vampire Crawlers is probably the biggest surprise of Steam Next Fest for me. I went into it being interested, I would say, in what Ponkel was cooking up next after the success of Vampire Survivors. I was not expecting them to take such a big swing and absolutely knock it out of the park. And if this thing is on mobile, I'm dunked. I'm done for, man. My productivity is going to tank the same way most people's productivity tanked when Vampire Survivors came out. Mine didn't, because I had a couple runs early on where my eye is completely unfocused and I realized I didn't need to play the game anymore. I could just sit there for the last 10 minutes of a run and just win without doing anything or collecting any more items. And that does not seem like it would ever be the case in Vampire Crawlers. Vampire Crawlers is a much more active experience, and that's really exciting to me. And it'll probably be really exciting to you, and I imagine most people when it comes out and starts winning a bunch of awards and people go nuts for it. Vampire Crawlers is one to keep your eye on. AP Thompson is an indie developer who's worked on a bunch of games that you might have heard of. The most recent one is Consume Me, one of my favorite games from last year. Consume Me was basically an autobiographical life sim game with WarioWare minigame elements that told the story of a person living in New York and just trying to keep it all together. It's harrowing and it's funny and it's really endearing, and I think you should definitely play it. But all the while in the background, AP Thompson was working on a new game called Titanium Court, which has a demo that I absolutely devoured. Nope, no pun intended. Titanium Court is the kind of game that had been rumbling around in the game development and game media space for the past couple months. I just kept hearing about this great new game that AP Thompson was working on, but I couldn't get my hands on it. I couldn't see it, and I really wanted to know what this thing was that everybody was playing. But even when I asked, the response that I usually got was like, it's kind of too hard to describe, you just need to play it. And to a certain degree, I understand where people are coming from now that I've played it. Titanium Court at its core is like a roguelike, match 3, turn-based strategy game. And that's about as reductive a way as I could possibly put it, because the layer on top of all of that is this extreme, absurdist humor. You play as a character who wakes up in a castle and is unsure of where they are and how they got there. They seem to have come from our reality and end up in this place that's filled with fairies and magic and just a bunch of absurd, weird stuff. You're pretty quickly told that you're the queen of the fairies and that you're at war, and you better get to it because, enemies are on your doorstep right now. The way the game works is that every time you jump into a run, you're presented with a grid that's basically a match 3 grid, but that grid is also the map of the battlefield. You can see where enemies are, you can see rocks and rivers and forests and wheat that you can plow to make food. And the game is broken up into phases, which are referred to as high tide and low tide. And in high tide, you can move and maneuver the world by playing a match 3 game. So for example, if there are a bunch of enemies right near your castle, guess what? You can match 3 of them and then they just go away. During the high tide phase, you're deciding how many moves you want to spend on removing enemies from the battlefield and how many moves you want to spend on gaining more resources. So when you match 3 forests or mountains or rivers, you get wood and rock and water. You need to take those resources and spend them on units, which will then run out into the world and either farm for food or go attack enemy castles. This game has a very Monty Python style irreverence to it, not only in its writing, which is very good, but also in its imagery. When you lose a run, though, that's also where it gets deeply silly because there's a kind of palace intrigue thing going on. I mean, you are the queen of the fairies, but you don't really want to be. You want to go home. But all of these people are treating you as if you're the queen and also treating you as a queen who is going to get them through wartime. This is where the narrative starts to play out, and as you continue to do better in the game, you start to unlock more stuff you can do in the palace. It's really, really good. I made it to the end of this demo. I am dying to play the rest. I think this is going to be one of my favorite games of the year. It's kind of hard to not fall in love with it. Everyone I've talked to who's played it has said basically some version of the same thing, which is I had no idea what was happening at the beginning, and then I couldn't put it down until it was over. It's just one of those games, man. Titanium Court. 2018's Crosscode by Radical Fish Games is, in my opinion, still one of the most underrated games of the past decade. Crosscode takes place in a sci-fi world where there's a physical MMO that exists out in the world. So imagine you were sitting at home and you put on a VR headset and you kind of James Cameron Avatar style jacked into a robot that was going to be your body as you played through this MMO. And what that means is that it's almost the complete MMO experience, but it's a single player narrative RPG. There are a lot of things that stand out to me about Crosscode all these years later, but chief among them are the writing and the pixel art, man. I mean, the art in these games, they're going for a 16-bit style presentation for that game, and they just nail it. It's so beautiful. But ever since that game, which was their debut, I've just kind of been give Radical Fish a blank check. Whatever they make next, I'm on board for. And man, am I so glad to have played their new demo for Alabaster Dawn. Alabaster Dawn is another action RPG from Radical Fish, and it's so clear that they've learned so much about how to make games ever since making Crosscode. And I don't mean that as a way to disparage Crosscode. Again, a game I loved, but Alabaster Dawn just feels like it's punching at a completely different weight class. For one, that pixel art that I talked about loving with Crosscode, I just feel is on a completely different level in this game. Some of the character portraits and some of the environments and even just the way enemies move throughout the world, I'm so blown away by. The game opens just kind of telling you about its world, which is, I would say almost Final Fantasy X adjacent in terms of sin coming and attacking. In this game, there's an evil entity from space called Nyx that shows up and basically just like curses the entire world, and humanity needs to run and hide in these mountains and basically just like go into hypersleep and train to fight back against Nyx over time. When you first actually start playing the game in the tutorial, you're playing as a group of characters who are trying to fight back against Nyx using these weapons, which are basically gifts from the gods. They start teaching you how to slash and parry and do, you know, big special attacks and stuff. And right off the bat, I gotta say, the game is incredible mechanically. It feels so good to move around and to dodge and to hit things with your sword. But the other thing that really stood out to me immediately was the music. I mean, the music is just ridiculous in this game. It's so spectacular. It's one of those soundtracks that as soon as I heard it, like my first thought was, I can't wait for this to get released on Bandcamp so I can buy it and put it on my Zune. You might think that last part was a joke, but I actually do have a Microsoft Zune HD that I use to this day. Anyway, you're making your way through the tutorial, you're fighting all these enemies, and it all leads up to this big climactic fight where, you know, you're doing one final push and poof. All of the weapons disappear. The gods abandon humanity, and who knows what happens next. After that, you start playing as Juno, a character who thinks that she might be the last person alive on this planet, and the sole person capable of maybe fighting back against Nyx. But I think just that story setup and this presentation with this music and this incredible feeling gameplay all just blends together to create an experience that I can really only describe as like one that has the juice, you know? All I kept thinking while I was playing this demo was how impressive it was and how big of a deal this game was going to be when it comes out and how much people are going to go to bat for it in forums and talk about it forever. These are all things that could be said about Crosscode, but I don't think that game hit critical mass the way it probably should have, and I really think Alabaster Dawn has the potential to do that. It's just immediately such an impressive second outing. As long as their ability to like maintain this level of quality through the whole thing, story-wise at least, I think Alabaster Dawn's going to be huge. It feels to me like a game that's pulling from both everything they learned from Crosscode, but also all of these new inspirations from like some of the later Final Fantasies, like 12 and 13. I mean, God, there's even like a sphere grid in here, man. You know, like they're doing it. They're really pulling out all the stops. If nothing else, they at least hit a bullseye for me in particular. And with that, those are the 3 games from Steam Next Fest that I really wholeheartedly believe will probably go on to just like win a bunch of accolades and be a big deal and maybe become your favorite game. I mean, all 3 of them immediately became some of my favorite games just via their demos, so I can't even imagine what the full release of all 3 is going to look like. I'm really looking forward to them. That said, I did not only play 3 Steam Next Fest demos, I played a bunch of them and I liked a bunch of them, but these 3 in particular I really wanted to put a spotlight on, but all the other ones that I liked, I will highlight in another video very soon. But with that, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to support the channel, you can head over to patreon.com/wavelengths. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Share the video with a friend. Let me know if you play these games and if you'd like them. I really hope you do. I love sharing my enthusiasm about this kind of stuff, and I like when people, you know, reciprocate that. So that's going to be it for me. I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.